If you love great stories, you've come to the right place. Subscribe to my channel to make sure you don't miss any new videos. Like and share this video with your friends if you enjoyed it, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The return to King's Landing was not a triumph of a hero, but the homecoming of a god. As the three golden dragons, Tywin, Joffrey, and Miachella, crossed the Blackwater, they did not just bring the news of victory, they brought the heavy, suffocating weight of an absolute monarchy. Cersei Lannister sat atop Tywin, her blackened gold armor now a permanent part of her identity. From her vantage point in the clouds, the capital of the Seven Kingdoms looked like a small, fragile thing, a collection of stones and souls that existed only because she willed it. She had left the north in a state of emerald silence. The White Walkers were shattered, but so was the Stark rebellion and the Targaryen dream. Daenerys had retreated into the shadows of the Reach with the remnants of her wounded dragons, and Jaime was a ghost in the snow. As Tywin's massive claws touched down on the newly reinforced dragon ledge of the Red Keep, Cersei felt a surge of cold, singular purpose. She did not wait for her handmaidens or her guards. She unbuckled herself from the harness and stepped onto the stone, her boots clicking with a finality that seemed to echo across the entire city. "Your Grace," Qyburn said, kneeling so low his forehead touched the ash-covered floor. "The city is yours. The Golden Company has secured every gate. The Iron Bank has sent their final congratulations. There is no one left to challenge the Lion." Cersei looked at the city below. The streets were empty. The people had learned that to look upon the Queen was to invite the gaze of her monsters. "Is it finished, Qyburn? Is the wildfire replenished?" "The vaults are full, Your Grace. We have enough to turn the entire continent into a sun. But there is the matter of the survivors, the Stark girl, the dwarf, and the Silver Queen. They are rallying at the ruins of Dragonstone." Cersei walked toward the Iron Throne, the hall now stripped of all its former decorations. The banners of the Baratheons, the Tyrells, and even the old Lannister lions had been replaced by a single, massive tapestry of a dragon made of gold. "They are coming for justice, I assume," Cersei said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "They want to speak of the Lion's mercy. Let them come. I have prepared a mercy that they will never forget." Cersei did not sit on the Iron Throne. She had it modified. The jagged blades of the conquered lords were now partially melted and encased in a layer of solid gold, the gold taken from the silence of Highgarden. It was a throne that no longer looked like a chair of swords. It looked like a throne of fire. She sat upon it, and for the first time in years, she felt the weight of the crown of Westeros. But it didn't feel heavy. It felt right. "Bring in the prisoners," she commanded. A group of minor lords who had tried to switch sides during the Battle of Winterfell were dragged in. They were broken men, their faces etched with the horror of what they had seen in the north. Among them was Lord Edmure Tully, the last of his line, looking like a man who had already died. "You speak of mercy," Cersei said, leaning forward. The dragon Tywin, resting in the shadows behind the throne, let out a low, tectonic rumble that made the glass in the windows chatter. "You think mercy is a second chance. You think it is a return to the way things were. But I am a new kind of queen. My mercy is the gift of an end." She signaled to the guards, but instead of the headsman's axe, she turned to the dragon. "Tywin," she said softly. The golden beast moved forward, his scales scraping against the stone floor. He didn't roar. He simply breathed, a short, concentrated puff of golden heat. In an instant, the lords were not executed, they were erased. There was no blood, no screams, only the smell of ozone and a fine layer of gray dust on the floor. "That," Cersei said, looking at the horrified faces of her own court, "is the mercy of the Lion. It is quick, it is clean, and it leaves nothing behind to haunt the living." As the days passed, Cersei's isolation became absolute. She no longer spoke to anyone but Qyburn and her dragons. She spent her nights in the map room, but she wasn't looking at the Seven Kingdoms anymore. She was looking at the world. She saw the free cities, the Dothraki Sea, the lands of always winter. She saw a world that needed to be silenced. "They hate me," she whispered to the shadow of Miachella as the dragon perched on the balcony. "I can feel their hate rising from the streets like a foul mist. They think I am a monster." She reached out and touched the dragon's snout. "But they don't understand, do they? A monster is just a god who doesn't care if you're happy. I have given them peace. I have given them a world without war because no one is brave enough to fight anymore. Is that not the greatest mercy of all?" The dragon let out a soft hiss, its emerald eyes reflecting Cersei's own. Suddenly, a raven arrived, not from the north but from the east. It carried a message from the Golden Company's spies in Essos. Daenerys Targaryen had not just been rallying, she had been desperate. She had sold her final dragon egg, a relic she had kept, to buy a nameless, faceless assassin. Cersei laughed as she burned the scroll. An assassin, against a woman who rides the sun, she truly is a child. The part ends with Cersei standing on the battlements as a massive storm begins to roll in from the narrow sea. The sky is a bruised purple, and the waves of the Blackwater are churning with a violent energy. In the distance, she can see the silhouettes of the Targaryen fleet, what little remains of it. They are coming for the final stand. "Look at them, Tywin," Cersei said, her hand resting on the dragon's neck. "They are coming to take back a world that no longer exists. They are coming to fight a queen who has already moved beyond them." She looked down at her hands. They were steady, but they were no longer the hands of a woman. They were scarred by dragonfire, stained with the ash of Highgarden and the north, and heavy with the weight of 1,000 sins. "Let the bells ring," Cersei commanded the city. "Let them ring until the people's ears bleed. I want them to know that the lion is waiting. I want them to know that mercy is coming." The 3 dragons unfurl their wings, their spans so large they seem to hold the very towers of the castle in their grasp. The silence of Highgarden had come home to King's Landing, and the final debt was about to be paid. The storm that had been brewing over the narrow sea finally broke over King's Landing with a violence that felt biblical. Thunder drowned out the sound of the waves, and lightning illuminated the city in jagged, strobe-like flashes of white. But the most terrifying light was not coming from the clouds. It was the emerald glow of the wildfire torches lining every wall of the Red Keep. And the golden shimmer of the 3 dragons, perched atop the towers like gargoyles of the apocalypse. Cersei Lannister stood on the balcony of the Great Hall. She didn't flinch at the thunder. She was strapped into her riding armor, her fingers rhythmically tapping the hilt of a dagger made of dragon bone. "They are here," she whispered. Emerging from the rain and the mist, the remnants of the Targaryen and Stark forces appeared. It was a pathetic sight compared to the grand armies of the past, a few battered ships, a handful of Northmen, and the survivors of the Unsullied. But leading them was the shadow that had haunted Cersei's dreams. Drogon soared through the storm, his black scales slick with rain, his roar a primal scream of grief. Beside him, the green dragon **Regal* limped through the air, his wings tattered from the north, but his eyes still burning with a desire for vengeance. Cersei didn't wait for them to reach the walls. She climbed onto Tywin's back, the golden dragon letting out a roar that shook the very foundations of the Red Keep. Joffrey and Miachella followed, their wings snapping open with the sound of thunderclaps. "Dracarys!" Cersei screamed, the word torn from her throat by the wind. The sky became a canvas of competing fires. Tywin and Drogon collided over the Blackwater, a clash of gold and black that sent a shockwave through the city. Cersei felt the heat of Drogon's breath. It was different from the wildfire. It was older, deeper, and full of a mother's rage. But Tywin was faster. Cersei had spent months training him for this specific fight. She commanded the golden dragon to spiral upward, dragging Drogon into the thin, freezing air of the upper atmosphere where the black dragon's size became a burden. "Joffrey, Miachella, the fleet," Cersei signaled. The 2 smaller dragons dived. They didn't use fire, they used the lion's mercy. They dropped the final, refined canisters of wildfire directly onto the Targaryen ships. The explosion was so powerful that it created a vacuum, sucking the air out of the lungs of the sailors before the green fire consumed their flesh. The Blackwater didn't just burn, it became a lake of emerald sun. As Cersei circled back, she saw Rhaegal pinning Joffrey against the side of the dragon pit. The green dragon's teeth were sunk deep into the crimson dragon's neck. Cersei felt a sharp, agonizing pull in her own chest. The psychic tether between her and her children was so strong that she felt Joffrey's pain as her own. "Tywin, save him," she shrieked. But she was too late. Rhaegal's jaws snapped shut, and Joffrey's body went limp, falling like a broken doll into the ruins of the pit. The sound of his impact was muffled by the roar of the wildfire. Cersei's scream was not human. It was the howl of a mother who had lost everything twice over. In her rage, she drove Tywin straight at Rhaegal. The golden dragon didn't just breathe fire. He used his massive weight to ram the green dragon midair. They tumbled together, a ball of gold and green, toward the courtyard of the Red Keep. They hit the ground with a force that shattered the stone. Tywin emerged from the dust, his golden scales cracked and bleeding, but his jaws were locked around Rhaegal's throat. With a violent wrench, Tywin tore the life from the green dragon. Cersei dismounted, her boots hitting the blood-slicked stones. She looked at the dead dragon, then at the sky, where Drogon and Daenerys were still circling. She didn't feel fear. She felt a cold, crystalline clarity. The world was ending, and she was the one holding the torch. "Cersei." The voice came from the smoke-filled archway of the courtyard. Cersei turned, her hand going to her dagger. It was Jaime. He was alone. His armor was gone, replaced by simple, travel-worn furs. He was covered in the ash of the city, and his golden hand was missing, replaced by a stump wrapped in dirty bandages. He looked like a beggar, but his eyes were the only things in the world that still looked at her with love. "You came," Cersei said, her voice trembling for the first time in years. "I told you I would," Jaime said, stepping over the carcass of Rhaegal. "I came to stop this, Cersei. Look at the city, it's burning. The wildfire is out of control. Qyburn is dead, one of the canisters exploded in the laboratory. There's no one left to stop the fire." "Let it burn, Jaime," Cersei said, walking toward him. She looked at the Red Keep, which was now glowing with a sickly green light from the vaults below. "I built this world for us. I killed everyone who tried to take it. If we can't have it, no one can." "You didn't build this for us," Jaime said, tears carving paths through the soot on his face. "You built this for your ghosts. Joffrey, Miachella, Tommen, they wouldn't want this. They wouldn't want to be the names on a million gravestones." He reached out his one good hand. "Come with me. There's a boat in the secret tunnels. We can leave. We can go to Pentos, to Bravos, anywhere. Let the dragons have the throne. Let the Targaryen girl rule the ash." Cersei looked at his hand. For a second she saw a path out, a life without the crown, without the fire. But then a shadow passed over them. Drogon landed on the walls above the courtyard. Daenerys Targaryen stood on the dragon's back, her face a mask of grief and madness that mirrored Cersei's own. She raised her hand, and the dragon's throat began to glow orange. "There is no leaving, Jaime," Cersei whispered. She looked at her brother, her lover, her twin. "We came into this world together. We leave it together." Cersei didn't run. She didn't hide. She walked to Jaime and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. Jaime held her, his chin resting on her head, his eyes closing as he accepted the inevitable. Above them, Daenerys gave the final command. But it wasn't just Drogon's fire. The heat from the dragon's breath triggered the massive wildfire caches Cersei had hidden beneath the floorboards of the courtyard. "I love you," Jaime whispered. "I am the fire," Cersei replied. The explosion was not a sound. It was an erasure. The Red Keep, the Iron Throne, the Golden Dragons, and the Twin Lions were consumed in a pillar of green and orange flame that rose so high it could be seen from the wall. The snow that fell over King's Landing was no longer white. It was a heavy, gray soot that blanketed the ruins of the capital like a funeral shroud. The great city, the heart of the 7 kingdoms for 3 centuries, was gone. Where the Red Keep once stood, there was only a jagged, blackened tooth of rock and twisted iron, still radiating a faint, sickly green warmth from the pockets of wildfire that refused to die. The silence of Highgarden had become the silence of the world. Daenerys Targaryen stood on the charred remains of the dragon ledge. Her silver hair was gone, burnt away in the final inferno. Leaving her head a map of scars and red raw skin, she looked down at the courtyard, or where the courtyard used to be. Drogon crouched behind her, his black scales dull and cracked. He was the only dragon left in the world. Tywin, the golden dragon, was buried somewhere beneath 10,000 tons of rubble. Miachella had flown into the sea, her wings failing as the wildfire she carried ignited her own blood. The Lannister dragons were gone, but their legacy was written in the ash. A group of survivors, led by Tyrion Lannister and Jon Snow, picked their way through the debris. Tyrion moved like a man in a dream, his boots crunching over things he did not want to identify. He reached the center of what had been the Great Hall. There, beneath a fallen beam made of solid, melted gold, he found them. They were not charred beyond recognition. The way the stone had fallen had created a small, hollow pocket that shielded them from the worst of the flames, though the heat had fused their armor together. Cersei and Jaime lay entwined, their bodies a single sculpture of gold and steel. Cersei's face was serene, almost triumphant, her hand still clutching the scrap of Jaime's fur cloak. Tyrion knelt beside them, a sound escaping his throat that was neither a sob nor a laugh. It was the sound of a man who had lost the only people who truly knew him, even if they had hated him for it. "She won," Tyrion whispered, his voice cracking. "Won?" Jon Snow asked, his eyes hollow with the trauma of the North and the South. "Look around you, Tyrion. There is nothing left. No throne, no city, no people. How is this a victory?" "She didn't want a kingdom, Jon," Tyrion said, reaching out to touch the cold, golden metal hand of his brother. "She wanted to be the last thing the world remembered. She wanted the story of Westeros to end with her. And look, it has." In the center of the ruins, the Iron Throne remained. But it was no longer iron. The intense heat of the wildfire and the golden dragon's breath had melted the gold of Highgarden onto the ancient swords. It was a twisted, beautiful, and horrific throne of solid gold, shimmering even in the gray light of the ashfall. Daenerys approached it. She had dreamed of this chair since she was a girl in Pentos. She had crossed deserts, birthed dragons, and conquered cities for it. But as she stood before it, she realized the trap Cersei had set. To sit on that throne was to sit on the bones of 1,000,000 people. To rule this land was to rule a graveyard. Cersei had not just defended her crown, she had poisoned the very concept of queenship. Daenerys reached out to touch the gold, but she pulled her hand back. It was still hot. It would always be hot. "I cannot stay here," Daenerys said, her voice a ghostly whisper. "There is nowhere else to go," Tyrion replied, standing up and wiping the soot from his eyes. "The Reach is ash, the North is a tomb, the West is empty. You are the queen of the Cinders, Daenerys. That is the Lion's mercy." The scene shifts to several months later. The winter has deepened, turning the ruins of King's Landing into a jagged glacier of ice and soot. A small camp had been established at the edge of the city, but the survivors were few. People were moving back to the country, back to the small, isolated villages that the dragons had missed. The age of great houses was over. The age of kings and queens was a story told to frighten children in the dark. Daenerys Targaryen did not take the throne. One morning, without a word to her council or her soldiers, she climbed onto Drogon's back. She didn't look back at the city. She didn't look at the gilded grave of the Lannisters. She flew east, back across the narrow sea, toward the ruins of old Valyria. She was going home to the only place where monsters were understood. As she flew over the Blackwater, the camera pans down into the depths of the water. There, resting on the seabed, was the skull of Tywin, the golden dragon. A school of fish swam through his empty eye sockets. The gold that had once covered his scales was peeling away, drifting into the sand like forgotten dreams. The final scene takes us to a small, remote cave in the Westerlands, near the foundations of Casterly Rock. A group of children are huddled around a small fire. An old man, his face scarred by fire, is telling them a story. "In the end," the old man says, his voice a low rasp, "there was a queen who loved nothing but her own fire. She had 3 dragons made of gold and greed. She didn't want to save us. She wanted to be the sun so that we would all have to look at her, even if it blinded us. Did she die, grandfather? A little girl asks. She became the fire, the man replies. And now, every time you see a flicker of green in the northern lights, or hear the rumble of thunder that sounds like a lion's roar, you remember. The debt was paid. The world was burned to settle a Lannister's account. The camera pans out, moving away from the cave, over the desolate, empty fields of the Reach where not a single rose grows, over the frozen, blackened ruins of Winterfell, and finally, back to the site of King's Landing. The sun is setting, and for a brief moment, the light hits the melted gold of the ruined Red Keep. For that 1 second, the ruins look like a crown. The wind whistles through the jagged stones, sounding remarkably like a woman's laughter, sharp, cruel, and satisfied. The screen fades to black. There is no music, only the sound of the wind. Thanks for watching this episode. Like, share, and follow for more interesting stories and narrations. Thanks a lot.